All right, thank you everybody, and welcome to Brookline's presentation of corrections and probation. We have some experts within the field with us today to kind of speak on their particular areas of expertise within this industry to give everyone a better understanding of specifically, what types of careers are out there within corrections and probation, what to expect within the field, the different interactions in a day in the life, and just to, again, to provide more clarity and help somebody who's considering this field know exactly what to expect. We have two speakers with us today. One is Director Daniel Beckwith from Dismiss, and we have Supervisor Jerry, cannot pronounce the last name, I'm sorry, and there you go, and Lead Probation Officer with Pima County Juvenile Court. Truly appreciate both of you for taking the time out of your busy work days to spend some time with our community here and helping get a little bit of what you do out into the Tucson world here. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started here, but just for anybody who's attending, we will open it up to some questions after each speaker so that you can ask them directly any questions on anything they've shared. And then at the very end, of course, we can catch any other questions that you think of along the way. So we'll go ahead and get started. Without further ado, the director from Dismiss, Director Beckwith, you can go ahead and take the floor here.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be part of your program. My name is Dan Beckwith, and I've been in the criminal justice field for probably almost 40 years now. Starting off in the military in the United States Navy, and then going to work for a sheriff's department for a short time before going to work for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I spent 25 years working for the Bureau of Prisons in 10 different facilities and different positions, starting from a correctional officer to a correctional lieutenant to an investigative agent to the deputy chief of intelligence for the Bureau, and then associate warden at a couple of facilities before I retired. So I've spent a lot of time in corrections and a lot of time working in and around law enforcement for many years. About 10 years of my experience were dedicated to running a multi-agency gang task force for the Bureau of Prisons. It was a culmination of Bureau of Prisons, U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Probation. We had FBI, ATF, California Department of Corrections. So having said that, after retiring in 2011, I then began work for the American Correctional Association, completing correctional audits of jails and adult correctional facilities. Worked for the GEO Corporation and private corrections as a deputy warden, and currently now working for Dismiss Charities for more than 5 years in residential reentry. So my experience has taken me from street law enforcement to corrections and now on to community reentry for offenders coming back into the community after serving their sentences. I will say with all of that, it's been a great reward to be able to work with the professionals that I've worked with over the years. To work within the criminal justice field, which right now is being battered so very badly for some of the officers that have taken the actions that they have taken. And unfortunately, throughout history, we typically have anywhere between 3 and 10% of any given employee that will violate the policies and procedures and protocols of their professionalism. And that includes corrections, that includes law enforcement. For probably about 8 years of my career, I wound up investigating both staff and inmates for violations of policy and violations of law. And oftentimes, many of the investigations that I did of inmates or gangs led me to do investigations of staff. And I felt like right now with what we're going through in law enforcement, in law enforcement in general and policing specific, I think it's important to note what many others are noting and some are forgetting is that we have a lot of dedicated men and women of every race, creed, and color that are dedicating themselves to our safety. And I think it's an admirable profession to be in. And unfortunately, I feel like we may lose a lot of good people because of the scrutiny that they're currently under, and because of the mistakes of a few that are hurting many. So having said that, again, criminal justice has got such a wide variety of employment opportunities, ranging from police to the court system, to the judicial system. Law enforcement carries many different folds, from U.S. Marshals and federal agencies to local police departments to sheriff's departments. And I highly encourage those people that want to do justice, that want to be involved in a positive way in making positive changes in people's lives, to continue on their path in criminal justice, because you do find reward. Personally, I found a lot of reward coming from the correction side of it now to the reentry. I went from basically my responsibility was to investigate crimes and conduct within a prison and keep people in prison that were supposed to be there to protect them from society. My role has now changed in many ways to helping those same individuals that have completed their time or are about to complete their time reintegrate back into society, and try to help them reintegrate in a positive way, getting them resources to things that they haven't had before. Social justice programs, employment programs, family orientation, and employment is one of the most important aspects of reentry, because let's face it, a way to make a living describes a lot of our self-worth. If we can't provide for ourselves and our family, that will often lead back to a life of crime. And so I think it's one of the most important things that we can do. But I think, and it's been proven to me over the years, over many, many years, that we have to stay positive in whatever we do. We can't fall into the pitfall of our current environment taking us down a path where we lose our faith in our policies, our procedures, our establishments, and we give them up for something else. It's a choice that everybody has to make, and we all go through our spots in life where we see something and we have to make a choice, as many of these police officers do every day when they're faced with volatile situations, is they make a choice. Corrections field is no different. U.S. probation officers are faced with some of the same challenges when they're supervising offenders. We all have to make sure that we're following our policies and protocols, and often just making good, sound decisions based upon our training, and hopefully making those decisions based on humanity, and making sure that we're giving our full effort towards de-escalation, conflict resolution, as opposed to just arrest and move on. And that's one of the things that I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, is remember that no matter where we are, no matter what position we have within a criminal justice system, our function is for justice. Our function is for humanity. Our function is to make each other better, hold each other accountable, and support those that need our support the most. When I look at some of our careers and where we've gone and the difference in policing over the years, it reminds me of lots of different times throughout the country when community policing was at its best. And we were out there, we had police officers out walking patrols in communities and dealing with the people on the street, talking to them. They knew the neighbors. They knew the people they surrounded, and the people trusted them. And because of the anti-terrorism initiatives that took place and the high focus on terrorism, on master criminal enterprises, we lost some of that community policing and wound up going into many of these task forces that are just targeting those that are committing the highest rates of crime. And so I think some of that time we lost focus with our community, and I think we're coming back into a role right now that the community is demanding and asking for us to reintegrate and get back involved and understand our community. But that doesn't mean that we can change so much that we don't enforce the laws and the rules of the country that keep us safe. Is there anybody that has any questions or a target aspect that you would like me to address beyond that?
I just wanted to comment. I have worked with at a previous company where there were a lot of people who were transitioning from prison who were looking for work, and I had talked with many of them and the struggles that they had with somebody just giving them a chance. I remember the guy describing, he's like, you just look at that question, that the last question on the application that says, have you ever, committed a crime or been convicted of a felony? And he goes, and I have to answer it yes, but I know in doing so just means that person's never going to call me. And it was tough to hear those conversations again and again. I mean, I realized people had made some mistakes, but in hearing their story, they really wanted to change their life around and were just struggling for somebody to give them a chance.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of companies are now giving chances. A lot of states have initiated to remove that box to where it's not part of the initial interview process. And so they're getting to those interviews rather than being declined just based upon what they put a check mark in a box. But when they get to those interviews, they have to be ready. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we do here at Dismiss is through our employment orientation and reminding those residents that were inmates that they learned a lot even if they were in prison. Almost every one of them had a job doing something and gaining experience while they were in prison. And when they convert some of that information over to a resume, it's amazing how many of them are getting employed right now. Prior to the COVID-19 issues that we've been facing over the last 3 months since March and late February and early March, we were up to 89 to 90% employment rates for our residents, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
A good number of those were actually good employment opportunities. We're talking about welders. We're talking about tradesmen, carpenters. It wasn't just the landscapers and dishwashers. But unfortunately, a lot of, again, because of the COVID-19, a lot of those companies have closed up. They weren't working. So a lot of our residents did lose employment. I think right now we're probably at about 35% where we were at 89%. But I believe as we open and as things are changing, the employment opportunities are going to go back and be there again. And it's about reaching out, informing employers, and informing them of the opportunities and the tax benefits that are out there for second chance money that is available to them if they give some of these folks a chance. Because a good number of them are hungry to go back to work, and they're willing to work. They're willing to put forth their effort if somebody gives them a chance.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the one of the toughest parts of your job?
I think the hardest part of the job for me is when you've got somebody that isn't trying and you're putting forth your effort and your staff are putting forth their effort and the person does not care enough to contribute themselves and you wind up having to let them or have them go back to prison rather than go out and succeed. On the opposite side of that, that's the greatest joy that we have, is when somebody comes out and they didn't think they had a chance, and you see them thrive. And you get to hear their stories about, hey, I just got my job. Hey, I just got my first paycheck. Hey, I just got paid my first month's rent. I'm getting ready to leave here. Hey, I just made supervisor and I'm doing well. And now I'm ready to hire some of the folks that were willing to hire me. You have as many success stories as you do, and actually more success stories in this environment than you do failures.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else have any questions?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
I was hoping that, and thank you for everything you do, by the way, because I 100% support what you do, and reintegration. And I think that is one thing that is often left out of conversations when it comes to the criminal justice field, and I think it's an amazing thing. But what are some things that you could maybe describe about your career that have benefited you in ways as far as the satisfaction you get from the job, and what are some things that motivate you to kind of keep moving forward with the things that you do on a daily basis?
Well, I think to begin with, I was one of those that came right out of the military. Rather than coming out of high school and going to college, I came out of high school and joined the military. When I got out of the military, my wife was 6 months pregnant, and I needed the job. So I wound up going to work for the Bureau of Prisons as a correctional officer, worked my way up through the ranks. And one of the things that I found was I probably had to work 3 times harder than a lot of my counterparts that had gone to college and gotten their degree. I was bypassed from many promotions because of the fact that I did not have that 4-year degree. It wasn't until I actually retired from the Bureau of Prisons that I went back to college and got my criminal justice degree and got my cybersecurity degree and my degree in network administration, focusing on cybercrime. And it was kind of interesting because when I first got out, when I first retired from the Bureau of Prisons after running multi-million-dollar operations, and I was applying for non-criminal justice jobs, I was told in many conversations with employers, you have a master's degree and experience, but you don't have a 4-year degree, so I cannot hire you. That inspired me. It motivated me. So I went back and got my degree, and I found as soon as I did, I started getting a lot of phone calls. And employment was being offered in many, many ways, in many directions. And at once I thought I wouldn't go back to criminal justice. But then when this job came up, working in reentry, and I saw the company and I saw the values of the company and their objectives, which their primary objective was healing the human spirit, I knew that was the direction I was going to go. And it wasn't about the money, because the money was less than other employers that I could have gone to. But that degree just opened up that door where I got to be a representative for Dismas. I got to go back into something to help other people, to take a lot of my primary experiences in working in corrections, to use it to benefit others. And I think there's nothing better you can do than to benefit others when you can take those experiences. So I think one message I would have is, first of all, you're doing the right thing by attending Brookline College, working towards your degree, getting your criminal justice degree. I can tell you, as an employer that hires, I've hired a lot of people that have their bachelor's degree and even master's degree coming to work for Dismas Charities. I do a lot of in-house promotions, but one of the requirements for my in-house promotions for my counselors' jobs for my assistant director, for my supervisory jobs, is that they have to have a degree. I can hire people to come in without a degree as my resident monitors, which is the baseline security. But for almost every other position, they have to have at least a 2 to 4 year degree, depending on the position. So I think that the education is important. I think the combined education and experience is important. But I think the internships that you experience while you're in college will open your eyes to a lot of things that you may not have thought about. That internship is a trial period for you to understand, is this the direction I want to go? Do I really want to be that cop, or do I want to be a social worker? What role am I going to play in that criminal justice field that's going to satisfy my needs and help me help others?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks.
All right, so it's about 1:22. So if nobody has any other questions, we'll go ahead and get with Supervisor Jerry here. And then again, if you think of any additional questions, we can offer those up at the end. Hopefully, I mean, if Mr. Beckworth, in the interest of your time, if you're able to stay, great. But if you aren't, I truly understand. Obviously, I see you're at work, so if you need to get going, you have the opportunity to do so, and I certainly appreciate your time.
I'll be listening in as I'm addressing others, so I'll be here in case there is any questions.
Okay.
And I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and beneficial.
Great. Okay, Jerry, are you still there?
I still am here.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we'll go ahead and give you the floor here. Take it away.
All righty. So my name is Jerry Irigoyen. My experience is a little bit different from Mr. Beckwith's. Currently, I'm a supervisor with Pima County Juvenile Court. I actually, directly out of high school, started my college career choosing a criminal justice administration major. However, a couple years into that, life happened, had a couple kids, got a job with another agency, and sort of stayed with that until my kids got to be around 13, 14, 15 and didn't really want me around that much. So I decided to head back to school. And when I did, I modified my major to business management. And so I received a bachelor's degree in business management and went on to get my master's degree in business administration. So at that point, I was still working for my previous employer. However, they had a layoff. And so at that time, I decided, now's a good time to sort of go back to my initial love of being involved in the criminal justice system, where I had, done a few short-term stints with like the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the Records Department. I worked for Department of Public Safety as a 911 dispatcher. But I really wanted to sort of focus on me and do something that was more about helping people rather than just making money to pay my bills. So I applied for the Pima County Juvenile Court as a probation officer. And to be honest with you, the only experience I had working with youth was raising my own 2 children. And come to find out, it suited me. They took a chance on me, so I didn't have that experience, but I certainly had the drive and the willingness to learn. So I started off my career here at juvenile court working as a diversion officer. So I work with youth and families, which makes this a little bit different, this career path, because when a youth is referred to the court or arrested, you're not dealing just with the youth as you would be with an adult. As an adult, they don't necessarily care what your mommy thinks, but for youth, we do. We do care what situations the family's running into and how we can sort of help the family as a whole. So I worked the diversion program where basically it was youth who first and second time misdemeanor referrals who then come do an interview with the probation officer, and then are assigned a consequence. And as long as they complete that, their case is closed. So I did that for a couple of years, and I really loved it because I got to work with a lot of the younger youth who are referred to the court. If you didn't realize, you can be 8 years old and be arrested in this county. So a lot of kids were referred for things that maybe in years past they would not have been arrested for. Those things would have been managed either by the community or by the family. However, times have changed. So I enjoyed that a lot. But I moved on to my second detail here at juvenile court and worked as an investigations officer, which actually turned out to be one of my favorite details. We, as investigation officers, really help us navigate through the court system for the families. You do a lot of explaining about what things mean. Many of the families who are involved with the court, it's the first time they've ever been court involved. They're very worried, they're nervous, and so part of your job is helping to quell that and just help them understand it. As long as they sort of follow the directives that the judge imposes, then everything's going to work out in the end. I enjoyed that because I love to write. A big part of a probation officer's job is paperwork. I would say that there maybe is some misinformation out there that even if you're a field officer, the majority of time you spend with doing your job is out in the field, and that's not necessarily true because even our field officers are spending about 70% of their time in the office, conducting interviews, on the telephone, seeking services, writing court reports, appearing in court. So the majority of the time is spent doing that. So there really needs to be a good emphasis placed on your ability to write well and to critically think, because another big part of a probation officer's job is making sound decisions and doing that probably on the spur of the moment, because things pop up all the time that you may or may not have had experience with before, and you have to make a decision about what's going to happen with that. About a year into my investigation officer detail, I was promoted to lead probation officer. So as a lead, you take on things like conflict cases. So those are cases where maybe there's another person who's employed at the court that has a youth who has been referred, or they're very high profile cases that need more case management than others. So you manage that. Also, an additional duty for a lead officer is to help with on-the-job training for all of our new officers. So that sort of brings us up to my my next iteration here at juvenile court, which was as the training lead officer. So that's where I really got to work with the new officers who came on board and sort of give them their initial onboarding training and sort of let them sit in on all the different job functions and see what those were all about, see what would interest them most and where they would be assigned, what they would be most appropriate with. Additionally, in that job function, I also went out to schools, did presentations for colleges, which is actually where I first ran into Miss Bousquet from Brookline, and began doing my adjunct instruction there. But we, would give presentations about sort of day in the life, but we'd also go out to primary schools and give presentations about, what expectations might be, give them some down-to-earth information on what could happen if you are arrested. I would go to safety fairs and things like that. So there was a lot of work with the community, going to different agencies, and really just being the face of the court within that job function. since then, which has been about 4 or 5 years, I've actually been assigned to our Alternative Community Engagement Services Center, which is a unit of the court where we deal solely with misdemeanor domestic violence cases and status offenses. So those cases where youth can only be arrested for particular crimes, such as truancy or runaway. As an adult, you can run away if you want to. As a juvenile, that technically you're not supposed to be able to do that. So they are brought here, and it's a very different sort of atmosphere here at the ACES Center. It's very homey. We have TVs, we have couches, we have a ping pong table. It's really meant for a respite time for both the youth to calm down, but also for the family, the guardians, to calm down before they come back together and see where the case is going to go after that. So I've had a pretty broad array of experience here at juvenile court, and I would say that one of the things I like best about working here at juvenile court is actually working with youth. I do feel that we have a huge opportunity to help redirect youth before they get too far down the negative path. But also there's a big opportunity to wear a lot of hats here within this career as a probation officer for juveniles, because we do a lot of social work, a lot of education. We help advocate for services for youth and family. We try to make our best recommendations to the judge. We are held to a high degree of professionalism because, again, we do work at the pleasure of the court here, and it is our job to sort of navigate what victims want, what's best for the community, what the youth might need in terms of their competency objectives, whether that be education or address behavioral health needs. So although we're considered a probation officer, we're very much the workhorses here at juvenile court, and we dabble in a lot of different areas, which does allow you to get a taste of a lot of different opportunities, because here also at juvenile court, we don't deal just with the delinquency side of things. We also deal with the dependency things. So when the state takes custody of a youth, our judges here at the court handle those cases. So not only if you're interested in sort of criminal justice, social welfare type careers, you can sort of get the best of both worlds here. And we often have probation officers who move over to the dependency side and take jobs in that arena, and or those who choose to move over to adult probation, maybe want to have a different experience. And also, we have proven to be a great training ground for federal probation. We provide excellent training opportunities for our probation officers here. The first year they are here, they participate in multiple different types of trainings, and we have actually received letters of thanks from the federal probation chief there, thanking us for the wonderful job we do in training our officers, because then they are able to move forward in their career and, open up opportunities for themselves at the federal level. So I think there's sort of a little bit of everything here at juvenile court, and it just sort of depends on where your interests lie. And if you want to sort of get your foot in the door here, we also have opportunities in our detention center, because we are a one-stop shop here. So we have our courts, our detention center, and our probation offices all here in the same area. So as a probation officer, you're certainly down in detention sometimes, but we also do have people who get their foot in the door by coming in as a juvenile detention officer they might then be working towards their degree. It does provide them the opportunity to sort of pursue those educational requirements while still being involved with youth, families, and the criminal justice system. So that sort of brings me up to the present. I would just say that, there's no norm. You don't have to start out as a young kid coming into a career right away. As is obvious from my experience, I was 40 years old when I started working as a probation officer and never would go back. It's given me a lot of successes. I have kids sometimes come back to me as adults, letting me know that they've, joined the military or that they've gotten a job, had a family, doing well now, which the majority of youth do end up doing well. And that sort of counteracts those sometimes negative outcomes for some of our youth. So it can be an extremely rewarding career, and I know both as an instructor, as a mentor here at the court, and a trainer here, I love to work with newer folks to the career to sort of open their eyes to what opportunities might be available to them and encourage them to keep, keep working towards their dreams, because even if something gets in the way, like life sometimes, there's always the opportunity to get back on that train later on. Any questions?
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it. And I look forward to continued, sort of these little venues to discuss these very important issues for youth and families within our community.
Hey, Jerry, this is Lisa. I did have a question for you. So you said it is a requirement for people to have their probation or their degree in criminal justice, or is it different? Is it just a bachelor's in general, or does it have to be criminal justice?
It does not have to be. It does not have to be criminal justice. As I said, my degree is in business. We have people who have degrees in English, history. It's all over the road. At juvenile court in particular, what they like to see is someone who maybe has experience working with youth, but that could be, hey, I volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club, or I've been babysitting since I was 12 years old. Again, a lot of our most recent new probation officers have had things like that, working at the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, those types of careers. So it's really expressing the desire to help youth succeed. We do like to hear that people, when they come in to interview, have done some research into what's going on currently. We're a very progressive court here. We've been recognized throughout the nation as having some of the most progressive programs, including the ACES Center. I always give a shout out to us. Yay, us. But across the nation, we've had jurisdictions come to look and see what we're doing here at juvenile court, both on the delinquency and the dependency side. So we have had a lot of progress made working towards improvements in things like disproportionate minority contact, working with alternatives to detention, juvenile justice reform in general, looking at reducing the number of minors who are detained at all. And along with that, as I said, part of the hats we wear here is for education. Some of that education means that we're educating other members of our community, like family, law
Mhm.
enforcement, that things have changed in juvenile justice, and we're very much about education and rehabilitation, and just hoping to change that trajectory for youth so we can keep from pulling them more deeply into the system. And so sometimes we have people who really want a let's get tough, sort of a scared straight program. And so we're educating all members of the community about how those have proven not to be truly effective for youth, and the different types of programming that we do here, which I would say as a probation officer here, you also have the opportunity to participate in a lot of community like coalitions, and also be a trainer in a lot of different areas. I am a certified trainer for motivational interviewing, for Crossroads, a cognitive behavioral therapy program. I've been a trainer here at Juvenile Court for domestic violence education. And so you can really open up a lot of doors by participating in those other sort of extracurricular activities here.
Mhm. I just had one more question. So there's diversion and then investigation in field. What was the fourth one?
We have juvenile intensive probation services.
JIPS. Okay. And what would you say that on average, based on those categories, what does the caseload look like? I realize diversion is going to be greater than field.
Right.
So what is the caseload about that? So in case people ask me that, what a caseload looks like for those 4 different
Sure.
departments.
So when I was an evaluation or diversion officer, my caseload was anywhere from 80 to 100 cases. But keep in mind, at that level, there's no direct supervision of youth, and you really don't go in the field. With those cases, you have families come in, interview, they sign a contract to complete consequences, and as long as they complete those, the case is closed. If not, then it moves on to an investigation officer, which handles the case throughout the court proceedings. For an investigation officer, you can have around 25 cases or so. Is pretty busy, because then you're attending hearings, you're doing those sort of deep dive investigations of the family circumstances, and talking with victims to see what their recommendations are, dealing with behavioral health agencies to see what sort of services you can get in place, and writing that report to the judge, and making recommendations that are based on your experience, knowledge, protocols, practices, what's available in the community. When it comes to youth being on standard probation, the caseload maximum is 35. You can expect to have 35 kids on a caseload. Again, I try to squelch some of the misinformation, because when a youth is on standard probation, the requirements to see them out in the field is really once per month. But you do also have to make collateral contacts and go to the schools and, talk with their teachers, check with grades, also be doing court reports if you have violations of probation. And then finally, with the JIPS, you're going to be anywhere 15 to 20 cases, because that is really where you have the intensive probation, where you're seeing a youth and their family 4 to 5 times a week at any hour of the day. However, at least for our JIPS unit, they generally work as a team. So you'll have the probation officer, and then you'll have a surveillance officer. And so they typically work together, know the cases sort of in and out, and the family and youth become very well acquainted with them. It's a good opportunity to be able to build rapport long term with a family.
Thank you so much for answering that. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Any other questions before we wrap this up? For the director, Mr. Beckworth, or for Supervisor Jerry? Okay. Well, again, I sincerely appreciate the two of you who I know are currently working, taking time out of your day for our community here to help our students. This presentation will be recorded and uploaded so that we can provide this information to, again, both current students now and prospective students in the future. So I truly appreciate all of this knowledge. It was quite a bit. So on behalf of everybody here at Brookline, I sincerely appreciate your time. And this hopefully will help some people with some clarity on getting into this field. And again, maybe we'll do some more of these in the future too. Of course, we'll communicate with you a little bit more time than this one, so you can plan accordingly. But if you don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap up then, guys.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Glad we were part of it.
All right, so everybody
Thank you.
stay safe and take care.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you so much.
I'm trying.